What is up, YouTube? This is Alex Rose, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to make those signature future bass chords, what kind of layering is required to nail it for a drop. That's coming up right now. Alright, so to start, I'm going to play a drop in context so you can understand what the chords and layers sound like. And then afterwards, I'm going to show you how to make the main chord patch for it, and then talk a little bit about how to layer it properly and how to implement it in a song and why I choose to do it this way. So here's the drop. That's enough. You guys get the picture. That's a track I'm working on, looking slotted for release in maybe a month or two. So let's look at what's actually going here in the saw chords. So we have 4 layers in total. We have basically the main body, we have a high-end layer, we have the main bass here, and then we have a sub going on. So let's just take out the bass and listen to that. So see, it's much thinner, and then we'll focus in on the actual patch that we'll be working on today. So I'm going to show you how to make that sound right here. It sounds a little bit thin when it's all alone, but of course, once you've layered it up, it sounds good. But we're actually going to be creating some of the other layers out of that, and it's important for the theory. So you may notice that the MIDI is not sustained chords. So it sounds like this on the initial pass. So you kind of get those future bass vibes. Obviously, future bass really good for these kind of complex big chords going on. And how I wrote these was just by ear, laid down the basic triads and then layered on top of those after using my MIDI keyboard. And you may notice that I'm choosing to leave these little gaps. That's just to accentuate basically the LFO that's not existent, because I'm not going to be using an LFO in this tutorial. I'm just going to be using envelopes and MIDI. And basically the advantage this has is you can be more creative with the MIDI in choosing, and more specific with the MIDI in choosing what you want the rate of that LFO, rather than going into automation and changing it there, because I find I get very frustrated with finding where the threshold is in automation for an LFO rate. So I'd much rather do it within the MIDI. I have full control this way, and it's a lot better this way for me. So into the actual patch itself. It's a pretty simple patch, as you could imagine from listening to that. So all we're going to do is turn on the sub oscillator, and we're not going to change the octave at all. We're just going to keep it at the same level. And basically what we're going to do is turn oscillator B on, turn the voices to 16 on oscillator A, and 5 on oscillator B. We're going to go down to just slightly under 50% detunement, and then a little bit less than that on the 5 here. And that's pretty much all good for that. And so this is where kind of the kicker of this patch comes in. We're going to set the attack up to 160, or actually 260 milliseconds, and that's going to give us this nice little curve here. This will make it perceived like there's almost a sidechain or LFO effect going on, like we talked about before. So that sounds like this. So you've already got the swelling effect going on from that long attack time. We're already kind of making a lot of progress. So we're going to be moving on to basically the effects now. And so we're going to start off with an EQ. And the EQ is going to be a low pass versus a high shelf going on. So for the frequency, we're doing 140 on the left here. So let's go down to about 140. And we're going to be doing 1050 on the right here. So bring this down to about 1050. For the Q values, we're going to go 45 against 60. So let's bring this down to 45. This is already at 60. And then finally, a 0 gain addition here, and we're just going to do a 3 gain addition over here. So about a little bit less than that, a little bit more than that. About there. Next, we're going to add some soft clip distortion. So we're going to change our mode to soft clip. And we're going to do a high pass. Kind of move it around kind of this area like that. We're going to do post. We're going to set the drive to a 100 and then the mix down to about 20%. So now we have this. So we're adding a bit of crunch there. Next, we're going to go on to the chorus. This is probably the most complicated one, where we want the rate all the way down to 0, the pre-delay down to about 0.7, and we'll put that for both of these guys, 0.7. The depth to 2.3, feedback to 10, so barely any there. The low pass filter all the way up. We don't want any low pass going on. And we're going to set the mix down to 30. Next, we're going to add a multiband compressor in Serum. So we're just going to slip on over to multiband there, and we're going to throw down the threshold by about -15. Ratio, we're going to keep at 4:1. The attack and release, we're going to keep the same. And then the gain, we're going to put up by about 6 dB. So let's do that. But there, that's fine. And then mix at 100. Now we have this. Now, the next thing, you can choose to include the reverb inside of Serum, or you can use your own. I'm just going to throw it on here for the sake of the video so you can hear it more complete. So size, we're going to drop down to 15. Decay, we're going to put down to 4 seconds here. Low cut, we're going to bump up to 22%. High cut all the way up to 80%. And by the way, we wanted to have the reverb typed to plate. We're going to put the dampness to 40%. Width, 100%. And then the mix, we're going to put down to 10%. So all together sounds like this. So now we're going to go into some of the effects chain that we're going to be adding. It's actually pretty sparse in terms of the effects. We're going to be using Maximus, but really you can use any type of big compressor. And all we're going to do is go to the Sound Goodizer preset A, and we're going to bump the mids just a little bit like that. Fairly easy step to do there. And then we're going to put an EQ that's just low cut up to, I have it to 212, and then I boosted the mids a little bit, and then a regular sidechain to the kick. And then this last EQ is just for doing high pass automation. So that's a pretty simple layer, and it altogether sounds like this. So the next layer that we're going to have to add here is this high-end layer. So this sounds like this. So if you could kind of make it out, just is adding a bit crisper of a high end to it, since that first layer is really focused on the mid. So it sounds like this one. And it's also a good idea to push that layer all the way to the sides when you're putting on effects and mixing. But you'll notice it has the exact same MIDI. And so what it actually is the exact same layer duplicated. And then I've just thrown all of the octaves up by 1. And so that creates that effect. And then when you put it on its own layer, we'll see 15. All it has is this EQ that's cut it really high to about 850 hertz. So yeah, it's a pretty simple layer to make once you've got the first one. Next, let's turn these both off. Then the main bass layer is pretty simple as well. It's just the fuzz bass, which comes with Serum, and it sounds like this. And we've made it quite weak compared to the original version of the song because we've cut out almost all of the high-end mids. So as you see here, just a soft high cut, and then a harsh one to let in the sub, which is just a regular sine wave, kind of 3 times oscillator with only 1 oscillator running, and it's of course just the bass notes dropped down there. So the bass and the sub bass together sound like this. And then all together it creates this. I have the high end bust into the regular kind of chords. So all those other effects are also being applied to it. Its own channel was really just to make sure that it had no low end or mids at all, but it's still being compressed together with that mid chord sound. And then in context of the song, you should be adding sidechain, which will be kind of making sure that that kick is punching through as much as possible. It's really easy to do using a limiter. Look it up anywhere. All right, so here's the result with just the chords and drums going. It will sound something like this. All right, so I hope you enjoyed. This has been Alex Rose. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see other kinds of videos and tutorials, make sure you comment them below, and don't forget to subscribe for future content. I'll see you next time.